Welcome to Mic'd Up with Stephen Ballmer in conversation with Mike Milken.
Pleasure to be here.
Great to be with you, and the world's most enthusiastic owner of a sports team. So I thought maybe we ought to see Steve in action. Do we have a little video we could show here?
Oh, jeez.
Maybe just kind of introducing Steve to you. We'll find out if we have one or not. We're going to give you a couple more seconds, and then we're going to get...
Steve Ballmer joined Microsoft in 1980, he was the company's 30th employee. 20 years later, Ballmer was named Chief Executive Officer, a position he held until he retired in 2014. During his tenure, Microsoft grew to almost $80 billion in revenue and was the third most profitable company in the United States.
Shortly after I retired, my wife, who has been running our philanthropic activities for years, she said, come on, let's get your brain engaged here on some of these issues of children. And I said, now come on. The government really does this. Is there really a role for us other than paying our taxes? And she said, come on, dude, you can do better than that.
This conversation inspired Ballmer to become more active in the family's charitable organization, the Ballmer Group, which improves economic mobility for children and families in the United States.
Every kid in America deserves an opportunity to advance from where their parents were economically. It made me really want to ask the question, how much does the government do for kids in need? And it was almost impossible to find this stuff.
Ballmer decided to fill this void by launching USA Facts, a major project aimed at making government data about tax revenues, expenditures, and outcomes more accessible and understandable.
The one thing about numbers that makes them better than adjectives, adjectives can get partisan. Numbers can't get partisan.
Ballmer's passion for numbers is matched by his love of basketball. In 2014, he realized his dream of owning an NBA team when he purchased the Los Angeles Clippers for $2 billion. Ballmer has quickly earned a reputation as the NBA's most enthusiastic team owner.
Well, Steve, what can we say? Let us start out. We all have goals in life and objectives. But let's start with the Clippers. You know, there are joys, there are sorrows, there are frustrations, and it's hard to watch the Clippers in person at the arena or on television without seeing you right behind the bench there. Tell us a little bit about the emotion of watching your team play versus being a CEO of Microsoft.
Oh, emotion. Emotion, quite different. Probably in a few ways. Number one, the environment. Other than like a sales meeting at Microsoft, you know, we sit there, we talk about plans, the engineers, you know, it's all solid. It's got a long-term time frame. In basketball, boom, 24 seconds, did we score or not? Boom, 2.5 hours, did we win the game or not? Boom, boom, did somebody do something exciting? Just go up and boom, throw it down. Did we lose? Oh, did we win? No, it was really emotional to run look, I loved running Microsoft, but it's a whole different notion of two things. Number one, just, you know, the burst of adrenaline is very different. And number two, sports actually has a very high accountability culture. In a way, even more high accountability than business. Because in business, you can always say, okay, we're going to get it tomorrow, even if we didn't get it today. In sports, it's just over. And you just have to start all over again.
Now, why basketball? There's only 82 games in the season. If you went into baseball, you got 162 games. I mean, why basketball, not baseball?
I don't want to offend anybody, Baseball has a little slower pace. And yes, it would be 162 opportunities, but I don't think my rush would be the same way. When I was a kid, I was a total basketball stats guy. I loved it. When I was about 11, I learned about basketball, and then it was onward.
Now, let's step back. When you're running a business, if you've built apps or software that works, and someone tells you during the time there was a glitch in some part of the program, what happened in Microsoft when you needed to do a correction? In sports, you build a team, and then someone is injured. And before you purchase the team, people, if they got traded or drafted by the Clippers, they needed to take out insurance because there was a high correlation that they could get injured even if they were the number 1 draft pick before the season started. And so one injury. Boston has done fantastic, but Kyrie Irving is not in the playoffs, and Hayward is not in the playoffs this year. How do you adjust or manage something where an injury, a physical injury to a player with only 5 on the court at one time, can change the whole outcome?
With great difficulty. The ability in software, you have a glitch, boom, you can literally assign people and go fix it. You have an injury in basketball, the way the rules work, it's not as if you can completely fill the role, except in catastrophic cases, then you get certain exceptions from the league to go add players, which you just don't get in basketball. How do you adjust? Number 1, you hope you built a deep bench. That's important. So you have, they call it in basketball, next man up, okay? Boom, he's hurt, he's not getting the job done. Boom, next man up. So you hope you have a next man up. And you can work on that. And then number 2, coaches have to do an amazing job. We had more starting lineups this year than you could shake a stick at because of injuries. And Doc Rivers did a fantastic job of just juggling to find the right mix to keep us in there.
So what about an emotional attachment to your players? You know, when you're running a company like Microsoft, I'm assuming if I took a look at your top 20 positions, you've built a team, they were with you for quite a while. In sports, there's so many changes. We all remember growing up with a sports team, LA Dodgers here, where you had the same first baseman, second baseman, shortstop, third baseman for a decade. Now you have to check the lineup every day. How do you transfer, 1, your relationship with your team, and 2, the fans' relationship to the players?
Well, I'd say a couple things there. Number 1, I do make it a point to try to get to know all the guys a little bit, the key guys a little bit better. Like I would do in business, sort of skip levels, meeting with the players as opposed to just the coaches and general managers. So you do develop an emotional bond, and yet at the end of the day, the players and the teams recognize it's a business. And from the team side, you have to do better. And from the player side, there are things that guide you, whether it's money, opportunity to play with your friends. So let me give you 2 examples. When we traded Blake Griffin this year, I spent 3.5 years getting to know Blake. Blake was invested in me. That's a painful thing. At the end of last season, Chris Paul wanted to move to Houston. We facilitated that for him. And yeah, my feelings got just a little hurt by that, I'll admit. I still have a great relationship with Chris, but and for these players, you have to remember, it's a short playing span. They're only going to play, if they're lucky, 12, 13, 14 years, and if they're unlucky, much less. And so everybody's got to be more flexible than you'd need to be in business.
So a whole world is focused on this kid named Ball that the Lakers draft. And in opening the season, Clippers versus the Lakers. And you have a person named Beverly who took him to school, embarrassed him, and it was like a pro versus a high school kid, that game. I know that disappointed you a great deal.
Oh, it was so sad, Mike. We just came in and knocked on the Lakers and shut down the Rook. Too bad. Especially, look, this thing where you get two sports teams in one city, I didn't grow up that way. I mean, it's unique to LA and New York, and in a way, it's like, wow, not all the locals root for us. What do you mean by that? And, we're the team that hasn't won championships, so we got a little bit of that Avis and Hertz thing. We try harder. So I got a particular glee out of that game.
And then Beverly is injured.
Yes. And didn't play actually most of the season.
All right, let's turn this enthusiasm. What are you looking for in a player? Many of these players started in an environment of socioeconomic weakness, might have had one parent, difficult living conditions. People like Bill Milken, who's sitting here in the second row, 2018 in Los Angeles, and his communities and schools have tried to focus on this issue. But a lot of the kids that went and eventually went into basketball came from that world. What are you looking for in a player, and how can a team help that player mature, particularly if they only played 1 year in college, so they might be 19 years old today?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. One, obviously, you're looking at somebody who's accomplished, a good player, athletic. Now, the fact that somebody's accomplished tells you a lot. It actually tells you that they worked hard, that they had some level of high function in the way they grew up. You look for young men, kids with rookies, I would say, but young men who work their butt off. And there you can see the difference. You look for the fire in their eyes, in addition to all of the basketball skills and talent. You can look for a level of maturity, self-assurance without cockiness. This rookie, I'm not sure I'm allowed to talk about other teams' players, but this rookie, Donovan Mitchell, very impressive in the sense of how put together he is. I don't know him, so I don't know all the other factors. But when you look at something like that, you can be very, very impressed. When young men come into the league, we actually have a whole department that we call player development, the non-basketball side, where if a young man, for example, has never shot for healthy groceries or hasn't had a bank account and needs to work on some of those kinds of early life skills, we actually do have a team of people that work with the players on that. The union has a group of people who will work with the players on their finances, on their investment, et cetera. That is off limits to owners.
All right, so you want this new arena here in Los Angeles. Staples Center is the home to the Kings, to the Clippers, to the Lakers, to the local women's NBA team that also has won a title, and other type of activities. Why a new arena? Why a new location?
I would say 2 or 3 things. Number one, we'd like our own home. I mean, it's kind of like a home. And we feel oftentimes like we're paying in somebody else's house. All the Laker, blah, blah, blah. We even have to pay to cover up their banners during our game. So, number one, home. Number 2, modern arenas. Staples is from 1999. And modern arenas are not built the same way as old-style arenas in terms of space, luxury areas, etc. Number 3, oh, by the way, we can make money building an arena, which is important. Number 4 is competitive factors. We are signed up to having to play at the worst times. Monday night, who plays against Monday Night Football? Clippers. Saturday afternoon when it's sunny in LA? Clippers. Who has to play their games closest together on the weekends? Clippers. And it's in the lease, for God's sakes. So if nothing else, it's a competitive advantage that we don't have. and we're going to go get.
Now, how does Phil Anschutz feel about this?
Well, we sat down and talked, and in a way, I mean, he certainly has said he would like us to stay, but in a way, he only has a certain amount of flexibility. The building is old. He could not, realistically close it for a period of time and remodel. That probably doesn't work. So there's some issues there. And number two, a little bit, there's a zero-sum game. If we were to get the same economics and ability to play at the right times as the Lakers, somebody's got to suffer. Whether it's Phil, the Lakers, somebody. I mean, we are at a double-digit million
Well, we should
competitive
point out
disadvantage.
that Phil also owns the Kings, right?
Yes, he does. We're never going to get in front of the hockey team.
And he owns the second largest owner of the Lakers.
Yes.
And has right of first refusal on the Lakers. So do you think that could be hurting you? Okay. Okay.
Let's just put it this way. We want our house just so I could say, not in our house.
Okay. Now, let's move on. You've got this energy and you got the Clippers. And you cannot, no matter what you do, control all the variables, all the data, everything you analyze. If Beverly's hurt, all plans and how you built it are going to change. So you've committed $10 million a year for 6 years to strive together, cradle to this career network. Tell us about that. Why did you and Connie focus on it? What's its purpose? What are your goals? Why did you do it?
Well, our focus philanthropically is exclusively on the notion of giving kids who are born in disadvantaged circumstances better opportunity to move up economically. There certainly are kids born in America today who have have a very, very low probability of moving from where their parents are. In a sense, the American dream, to use the word, dries up. And I just don't think that's right. I don't think that's fair. Connie doesn't think it's right. It doesn't think it's fair. Then you say, how do you get after these issues? And the first thing people point to is education. The thing people often don't focus in on, one's ability to get an education is not all about the teachers. It is oftentimes about the level of function and stability in the kid's life. Is there enough food? Is the child late for school because they actually have to watch their younger brother or sister? Is it safe to walk to school? Did they stay in a car last night or in a house last night? And so part of the issue is, how do you address that? Now, some people will say that's government's job, which is kind of what I said when I retired from Microsoft. The truth is, government provides the funding, but it requires the communities to come together. The not-for-profits, the universities, the school systems, government, community groups, philanthropy, to take on that issue, to set some goals, to measure collectively the community against that. Otherwise, we'll keep putting more and more money into education as we, just go back a minute, the one you had up, if you can roll back. Oh, no, let's stay here. Let's roll here for just a second. You look at education results. High school graduation rates since 1998 are up. Reading proficiency, math proficiency, relatively flat. And only about 33% or so of kids in America are proficient in reading and math at the end of the 8th grade.
So let's
how do you graduate?
Let's take a data point there. In many ways, you can increase graduation rates by lowering standards. So some of you might be aware, for 8 years in the courts, we had this issue of high school exit exam in the state of California. And many people felt if you showed up for school, you should be able to graduate, regardless of whether you have academic levels. And so when you step back, what is the California high school exit exam? It's a pre-algebra test. Pre-algebra, and if you can get a high F once, 50%, you're considered proficient in math. So to increase graduation rates that shows in Steve's chart here, we lowered the standards so we could get that. Now what about English? English, to be proficient in English, you have to be able to write 1 page in English. And you're allowed to misspell 1 word wrong per line. That's it. Now, if you can achieve those 2 things, you are considered proficient and can get your high school degree. So I think it ties in. Let's go back to that slide you had up there.
And you look at it, I mean, I have to point out, people say it's class size. Well, we used to have a student-teacher ratio in the United States of 19-to-1. That's come down to 16-to-1. It's not student-teacher ratio. We're spending more per student. Inflation adjusted, that number was around $8,000 in 1980. It's above $11,000 today. It can't be spending. And I know people think the answer is to spend. What it can be is to look at the kids who grow up most disadvantaged and ask, what do they need besides education, as opposed to simply saying it's about education, let's spend more. That's not my way of saying we may not need more money in education, but we're not taking a whole child approach. Just go back forward to the then go to that circular one, because I want to make a point. So this is what I was describing in community-based partnership. On the right, government has to be involved in child welfare, health, food security. The school systems, early childhood education, my wife and I think is fundamentally important, because if you lose a kid by pre-kindergarten or kindergarten, you might lose the kid completely in terms of proficiency. The not-for-profits have a key role, whether it's after-school programs, communities and schools, which helps orchestrate additional resources coming into the schools, faith organizations, business, community groups, and philanthropy. How do you get people to work together in partnership? One of my objectives as a, let's call it, figure in LA, I don't live here, but I'll say very present in LA, is to see whether we can't convene such a partnership where people agree on some goals and really get after it. The Strive Together not-for-profit, they have a method of doing that. You know, what I will do is ask you and other leaders to say, hey, are we going to come together around this problem? Does every kid in LA have an opportunity at the American Dream? There are communities in LA, there's stuff going on in Watts of this nature, in East LA, but it requires an
Steve,
overall
let's
approach.
stop and just reinforce some of the points you've made. This is a graph that was created by a Nobel Prize winner, Bradford and Heckman here out of University of Chicago. And what this shows is if you're going to invest $1 in education, you get the highest return when a child is young. And so the challenges, and it's very interesting, 30, 40 years ago, I began to visit schools in China. Let's go back to that last slide, and then we'll come back to James Heckman in a moment. And what you saw in China is they spent 10 times as much on early child care per student as they did on college. In the United States, we were spending 10 times as much on college as we were on early child care. And when you look at that rate of return, let's go back and look at that Heckman graph again, you see here that it is so difficult to catch up. So $1 at 5 takes $3 at 15, takes $5 at 22, and takes $10 at 30 to achieve the same results. And as Professor at Stanford point out, next slide, that, you know, you depressingly has the capability that you could pick to a standard deviation of 2 and higher at 5. Who's going to be successful or not? And I think I just want to reemphasize the point that you and Connie have focused on here. We often think, why is that child not successful? But we haven't thought about what it took to get that child to school versus another environment. What happened at night? What happened during the day? And I want to reemphasize another point, Steve, that you have made. I had the honor of being able to teach math with Jaime Escalante at Garfield High more than 30 years ago here. Average class size for Jaime Escalante was 61. Every single child at that lower socioeconomic school that had him succeeded. He left Los Angeles when they told him that he couldn't have more than 20 students. Now 2/3 of all the students in the lifetime that had him as teacher would never have a chance. And he went to Sacramento, and many of you might remember they made this movie, Stand and Deliver, about Jaime Escalante, and in our National Education Award program, the Academy Award of Teachers, he won in 1988. So my point is, I just want to re-emphasize these points that Steve has made to you here. The importance of what's going on in the home and what happened before they hit school. And number two, the importance of early investment. Continue.
Can I throw a number or two that I've been looking at hard on this? Let's say we wanted to take every 3 and 4 year old, i.e. 2 grades before kindergarten, and enable for everybody, maybe on a sliding scale where more affluent kids pay more, and you say, but we're going to have universal access to those 2 grades pre-K. That would probably be able to be done for something like $70 to $90 billion a year. And if we want to also support moms with who may not know as much about parenting with visitation, you add that all in and you might get a bill of 120, 30, 40. That's a big number. There's no doubt about it. Government in the United States does spend $5.7 trillion, and we today spend about $700 billion on K through 12 education. So you can say, is it smart or not? You look at the Heckman chart you just showed us, and you'd say, I've even heard people say, and I disagree with this, but I've heard people say, let's cut spending on 10th, 11th, and 12th grade to pump it into pre-K. I just think we need more money in the pre-K and earlier phase for all the reasons you just highlighted.
So if we're talking about an additional 8 or 9 million kids, we're figuring out what it costs, and the ultimate investment will pay off 5 to 10-fold from that standpoint. And the discussion that Steve has spoken to you about has really been a movement of how valuable is 12th grade versus taking in 4-year-olds, and how that would shift. But I think these are many issues, and I want to get back to where there's numerous programs I think you're all aware of that have said, okay, we're going to figure out how to create an environment for lower income or kids that have challenges to get to college. The problem is a very low percent make it out of college, make it out of 4 years from that standpoint. And Steve, let's talk about how you see the back end, not just the front end there.
Yeah, the back end is certainly challenged. If people don't either complete 4-year school, complete 2-year school, or at least complete some kind of certification that qualifies for a middle-income job, all of this investment, in a sense, has been for close to naught. And kids do require additional supports. We're announcing a grant tomorrow to something called the College Advising Corp. We're going to do that here in LA tomorrow. And it's all about helping kids find the right college, and then some supports to the children or to the now young people as they go through college, whether it's extra mentorship, et cetera, because there's, again, not a lot of role models for a number of these kids to look to.
So as you're looking at the schedule for the conference, there's a program yesterday on opportunity zones. So in the tax bill that was passed and signed into law last December 22nd, there is an encouragement in over 1,000 parts of our country, every state, that if you invest your capital gains in these areas, you will not be taxed on your future capital gains. So it's like Singapore. There is no tax on capital gains. There is no tax on capital gains in Hong Kong. And so this will encourage people. Many years ago, 35 years ago, we began a program called Emerging Domestic Markets. Can we focus on these impoverished areas? But I want to stress to you to take a look. Last year, we brought every single person involved in the, quote, infrastructure build in America here. The 4 people that were appointed to this commission by the president, Richard Lefrak, Steve Roth, Bill Ford, Josh Harris, and Secretary Chow and others. Very little, if anything, happened in the last year, and that commission has been disbanded. But these opportunity zones create an incentive. Now, Steve pointed out that he's, at the moment, not a California citizen. Now, there is certain advantages as an individual to be a citizen in Washington, okay, versus California. And maybe there's no surprise that the two wealthiest people in the United States both live. They have homes in California, but they are Washington residents today.
That's correct.
But take a look at these opportunity zones. I'd like to switch, Steve, if we could, to another area. And that area is data. I commuted 5 hours a day for 8 years, and I used to love to get those prospectuses and read them. And what I discovered in the late 60s is people are constantly talking, but no one has done any research and no one knows the facts. You talk to a person and say, okay, why do you believe that? And they say, well, so-and-so told me. And then you go talk to so-and-so, and who told them? You can't find anyone that's looked at the facts. You have done something that no one has ever done in the history of the world. You've created a prospectus for our country. Tell us about that.
Well, as I said, when my wife and I were talking about our philanthropy, and she challenged me that government was not enough, I started looking for numbers. How much wealth gets transferred? What does it get transferred for? And frankly, I couldn't find that in any way. Sure, you can go all over the web and you're deep dark in somebody's PDF file. And at the end of the day, I said to myself, what does government do? And I was scratching my head and I said, if this was a company, I'd go read the 10K. What the heck is going on in the country? 10Ks are great documents. They're historical, they're not projections. Companies that prepare them get in really, really big trouble if they're inaccurate. You have to provide explanations, but just factual and mathematical, and you have to give context. You can't just give 1 year of experience. So we set out to create a 10K, not just for the federal government, because if you really look at what happens to a child or anything else, it's a combination of funding and policy that comes from federal, state, and local. So we put this all together. We wrote our prospectus. We, of course, build a website, too. And then this year, we created an annual report, since not everybody loves prospectuses like some of us.
Well, I mean, it's hard for me even to continue this interview now that I have this 10K here. Okay, you know this how I gravitate. Other people gravitate to other things. I gravitate to these 10Ks. I mean.
And we were pure. We were pure. We used the format of the 10K. That's why you can see what properties the government owns. We have a compensation table. We'll show you what all the governors and key executives make. But we'll also show you, for example, Social Security. What does it cost? What has gone on, not only with number of enrollees, but cost per enrollee. We do the analysis. We try to do 1 or 2 years. And if you go to the website, you can see the data back to 1980, because unlike business things, which are a little bit more dynamic, government is helpful to see the continuity. So we produced a 10K. We created a database to go do that. The database is there and available to be seen through the website. And in fact, what we let you do is our online 10K will give you even more ability to drill into some of the numbers, see more years associated with these things. We have an audit firm that doesn't verify the numbers, because the numbers are all government numbers. And some of the government numbers, frankly, disagree with one another. And I don't want you to think that's bad, because I actually think most professionals in government do a very competent job, despite some of the public rhetoric now, of putting these things together. But nobody's got the charge in government to essentially produce this kind of integrated data. And I think it is important. I'm going to go talk next week or the week after to the National Association of Government Auditors. That's probably not for all of you, but I'm like fired up for the opportunity. You know, and I'm with you on this, Mike. If you want to make a decision about something, you need the numbers. You can't just say, hey, let's spend more on education. Are you trying to spend it on teacher pay? Are you trying to spend it in investment in special education? Are you trying to spend it on teacher-student ratio? Are you trying to spend it in course diversity, the course offerings? Are you trying to spend it in supports for kids in school but not directly tied to education? These are all basic questions, and you need the numbers, I think, to then go make those decisions.
So I would it's hard to put this down, I want you to know. Forget Netflix, forget these things. But the idea that you have done this is such an amazing contribution to our country and to our government leaders. And this afternoon at lunch, we're going to spend some time talking about what Jim Kim has done at the World Bank. And they're going to publish in the next 2 weeks by countries and break down into regions what's happening in the human capital. And if you believe, as we do at the Milken Institute, that 75% of all the assets in the country are the productivity of the people, and another 15 or 20% is the social capital, the rules, the regulations, etc. Very small amount is what you see generally on the balance sheet. And he's going to give us that for the world. This is a phenomenal resource. How many people do you think will come online for everyone the physical? A person like myself, this is going under my pillow. Okay, I just want you to know, I'm not sharing mine with anyone. But how do you see the ratio of online versus physical?
Yeah, I think we'll see predominantly online, although we will give you a capability so you can print, and we'll send you a printed copy, because I do think there are things that are just easier, even though you get a little bit more interactivity online. We decided to print this year because some people like the format, and I understand that. The other thing we are doing, it's important to give context, which we really do here. We look at the totality of government, because you want to see, you don't want to just see what we spent, but maybe what percentage of everything we spent did we spend in a given area. $40 billion sounds like a lot of money on foreign aid, but you compare $40 billion to $5.7 trillion of total spend, and then you recognize that almost a third of foreign aid goes to Israel, Iraq, and Afghanistan, who are, in a sense, military allies, and you might form a different perspective. So most people will go online, and then the question is, how do we grab them? What do we grab through social media? What do we grab through video? How do we bring this alive? I have a concept over time where I'd like to do a point, counterpoint. You get people on both sides, because we are nonpartisan, and then I'd like to referee it based on the facts and not let people grab a number out of thin air that might be true but is totally misleading. We need more to do to bring this alive. Even for the folks who are willing to read.
And so in many ways, in the Milken Institute is mirroring, since we're nonpartisan, and you'll notice here we have very few, if any, where a person is allowed to give a speech. No matter who they are, even if they're the number one energetic fan in all of professional sports owners, we require an interviewer to make sure we stay on the facts. And what a beautiful annual report. I just want to stress. So I have a double package here, the 10K. And
let me grab the one page. This is like a cool thing. I just give me a sec. Oh, I lost the page. Let me get it back. Yeah, I mean, the debate on taxes is another one that drives me crazy. So you want to know how much money people make by income quintile. You want to know how much taxes they pay. You want to know what percentage of the taxes they pay. I'll give you just a factoid, just a little factoid. If you're in the bottom 20% of income in the United States today, what is your income? Including, your income. Under $9,000. under $9,000. And then government transfers get you some more, and I'm sure some of it is, black market economy on top of that.
Some of it is students.
Some of it is students, that's for sure.
Just to give you an example, when they were looking for opportunity zones where you had a high percentage of the people in a census tract, one of the ones that popped up was Palo Alto, because Stanford was located, and thousands, tens of thousands of students, report very low income. So you can get distorted. Let me ask you a question about this. Have you thought about giving this and trying to get it to be a required course for high school students?
We have a number
in their U.S. history class.
We do have a number of teaching groups that have come to us and talked about that. It is something that we have on our docket of things that we would like to get to. It is good that we learn in school. We have 3 branches of government, and we have a Sherman Act. But if you really want to understand just what does the government do, and is it a big operation, it is very hard. It's just not taught in schools. There are 23 million jobs working for the government in the United States of America. You'd think that might be an interesting thing to tell kids when they graduate. It's 15% or so of all jobs in the United States.
So I think there's a lot of corollary benefits that we all can think about. Learning what a balance sheet is as a student can serve them later in life. Understanding what assets, liabilities, understanding cash flow could help them later in life. And what better way to look at it but to look at it at a local, state, or federal government rather than trying to look at Apple's balance sheet or Microsoft's balance sheet. And our Center for Financial Markets, I already can see excitement, the idea that we could incorporate this in efforts here to educate. When we think about this and what's going on around the world, give us a little feeling. What is life like for you and Connie today?
Well, the thing I like most post my CEO job. CEO jobs are very time consuming. In a way, you don't get as much opportunity unless you're very diligent to just get white space in your brain and think. This customer is unhappy. We got to do a product review on this product. It's business review season. We've got to report quarterly earnings. And the chance to step back, take some time, and be reflective isn't there. Since I've retired, I actually heard the word from Sherry Lansing. I'm rewired, not retired. I get a chance to control my time. How much time to spend on the Clippers, how much time to spend on USA Facts or our philanthropy. Connie, my wife, will tell you I don't do a very good job of the control part, but at least I don't have any obligation. From Connie's perspective, we're now empty nesters. I'm now involved, and we have a great opportunity to really amp up our philanthropy, which we've been given a lot, and the question is, how do you make a difference? There's a lot of things that we can say are good. It's all good to give money to a food bank. What can we do that is a little more out of the box because we have so much more resources? Are there unique opportunities in this area of economic mobility?
Let's step back just for a moment. And I think it'd be very interesting for the people that are with us today or those that are watching us online. Today is May 1st, 2018. Let's talk about growing up. I had a chance to finance a close friend of mine who grew up with 2 silver spoons in his mouth. One side of his family had founded Merrill Lynch, and his oldest brother was actually called Merrill Lynch, were his first 2 names McGowan. And the other side of his family founded at the time, which was the largest supermarket in the United States, Safeway. So he had those challenges. What did he really want to do? He really wanted to own a baseball team. Okay, and it wasn't for Peter McGowan, the Giants would not have stayed in San Francisco. But that was really his passion. But he was thrust into the family businesses, became the CEO of Safeway, took it private, but In 93, the fact that he could keep the Giants in San Francisco fulfilled a lifetime dream. But last time I checked your Wikipedia, you did not grow up with 2 silver spoons in your mouth. Tell us about life as a young kid.
Yeah, my dad was an immigrant from Switzerland. Didn't finish high school. After World War II, was feeling claustrophobic. He went to work for the U.S. Army as an interpreter at the war trials at Nuremberg, which is where he met an American family that would sponsor him to come to the U.S. He'd had not a high school degree, but he hadn't had a bad education to that point. But he literally started out as a hotel lobby receptionist. That was his first job. Job 2, he was a payroll clerk. Somehow he talked his way into that. And he worked part-time on the assembly line until that drove him absolutely crazy. And he just kept working away, and wound up in a mid-level job at Ford. My grandma and grandpa on the other side were immigrants from what's now Belarus in the Ukraine, Jewish immigrants who came. My grandfather came in 1914, just before things got terrible, if you will, in the so-called old country. He had a second-grade education.
You're talking about the pogroms and
the pogroms, et cetera. He had been in the Russian army 9 years. Things get bad, and he joins his brothers and sisters. And he literally started out with nothing. Second-grade education, dirt floors in the house, and he gets into the junk business.
That's not the junk bond business. That's the actual junk business.
No, you're right. That's going through alleys and yards and stripping cars and selling parts. That was my grandpa's business. And, out of industry and hard work and culture, he had some role models. Somehow they managed to send one of his siblings was a barber. And they managed to scrap some money together, and he went to medical school from his barber background. I don't quite understand how that works, and then he went back later on in life to being a barber. So, in our family, my mom graduated high school, was well supported in that, but she too never went to college. But they had an ethic that they preached. My dad was an immigrant. He didn't know much about U.S. universities, and he always just said, you got to go to Harvard. I can remember being 8 years old, and my dad doesn't go to college, and he's telling me to go, and he's telling me to go to a place called Harvard, and my mom's just saying, I want you to be a happy kid, but brimming every time something goes well at school. So a lot of good supports in that context.
So you went to school, then what happened?
I go to school.
Harvard costs money to go to Harvard.
Yeah, you also can get scholarships to go to Harvard. I had some scholarship money. Not much, actually, some scholarship money. My dad, I borrowed some money from my dad. He had enough money to say he would pay for me to go to University of Michigan. So that was his contribution. Harvard was much, much more expensive. So borrowed some money, but then I got jobs. 1 year in college, I think I made $11,000, which was real money in 1975. I was a math teacher for other Harvard students. That paid really well. I worked around the newspaper, had summer job, and so with jobs, some scholarship, not much. My dad's contribution and some loans, I managed to make it through, and with the good fortune of Microsoft, business school I went for free. I had full scholarship.
When did you meet, and how did you meet Connie?
I met Connie through Microsoft. She was working at a PR agency that did work with Microsoft. We met in 1988. I'd been at Microsoft 8 years. She'd been at the agency 4. We did a press interview together with something called Computer Reseller News, and my eyes were wide open at that point.
Let's talk about the American dream. I mentioned to you, Steve, I was at Berkeley. We had the free speech movement in '64, and I came home in August, and the Watts riots were going on here, not too far from where Staples Center is today. And I couldn't really understand in a city of dreams, why is Los Angeles on fire? So I wanted to run the space program. I went to Berkeley to do that, and then shifted my career into finance and began reading data, and that data told me that no one really understood credit, and everything people said about credit was wrong. And you could be the head of Federal Reserve and tell you no country ever went bankrupt. No, they just default. So you followed a career path that sent you into a direction. How do you look at that career today? How do you look at technology today? Where is it going to take us, and how can you deploy it in the passions you have in philanthropy, our perspectives on the United States and our governments? Where do you see technology taking us in the future?
I think, the future of technology to positively impact our world, if anything, is underestimated and over-feared. Articles about will automation get rid of all jobs. What has been the pattern, I think will be the pattern, is automation lifts all boats and creates a different set of and kind of jobs. And that can be dislocating, but in the long run, uplifting. Take the work in social services that we focus in on. If again, with appropriate privacy, if you could help a kid throughout his cradle to career cycle, if you knew what was going on with the kid, if you could use delinquency data or attendance data in school, plus data on what's going on in the not-for-profits that may be serving that child, you will have a better outcome for that child. The technology is there. How do we apply it? And then how do we apply it better? Teaching aids, how do you apply it? And then how do you apply it better? In everyday walk of life, eventually we will have with us and actionable at all time a personal assistant. So I'll look at this gentleman here in the front row and I'll get a signal, maybe flashed into my eyes, his name, his biography, important information that might be relevant for me to know. I will be assisted. I will be assisted in saying, what I really want to understand is everything I need to be intelligent about my view of what we should we pass that school levy? That's really, might be a question. And yet, today, even with great resources, you may not know what questions to ask to even pull that stuff together, even though we've made it a lot simpler. So I see tech having an incredible impact on everything, very positive. People talk about artificial intelligence. We've been talking about that for years. The name changes, it goes up and down, and yet the notion that technology can enhance human creativity and human productivity, I think is just stunning. And, oh, by the way, since we're here in the esports pavilion, could be a lot of fun, too, for the next generation virtual reality games. We're actually, just one more thing on this. We're working on some tech for the clips so that literally, with a partner here in LA, a company called Second Spectrum, literally you could say, what is the perspective on this game if I was DeAndre Jordan? What does the game look like? If I was Lou Williams, what does the game look like? I think that kind of stuff would just be cool as heck. Tom Brady even at some point. Russell Wilson from my adopted hometown.
So just underlining one of the things that Steve pointed out, we don't know if it's going to be successful, but a company called Magic Leap is essentially put on glasses and anything you could see in a computer will be beamed into your eyes. So if you don't remember this person you met who's your best friend from 14 years ago that you saw on vacation in Cabo, who's coming up to you, your glasses will say, after they've screened this, who it is, etc., etc. Let me get to the last issue today. Last year at our global conference, where we bring together people from 64 countries, 5,000, our theme really was building meaningful lives. How can we have people feel they're going to have meaning and a chance for a meaningful life? Might not be related to economics. It might be related to what is their meaning in life. This year is a world in transition, not too different. Is the American dream alive and well today? What is the American dream to you? Because to me, it's not just America, it's for everyone. maybe give us a feeling as to how you have lived, Connie have lived an American dream in many ways, from where your parents came from and your grandparents. Does a person today in America have that chance?
First of all, when I think of the American dream, it's this aspiration that I can somehow do things that I never would have dreamed based upon my neighborhood, my parents. I can be aspirational. I can, so to speak, do whatever I want to do. And whether that is literally true or not, to some people, the question is, can I even aspire to be anything I'm not? Small thing which really made me sad. There's a documentary that Netflix produced called Last Chance U. It's about a community college in eastern Mississippi, kids who, athletes, football players who have not made D1 or the pros. They come there for their last chance. And it is a documentary. And in the documentary, at one point, they asked one of the young men and said, what does your life look like? He said, in my hometown, there's only two ways out. You either play football or you go in the military. That's it. That doesn't sound like the American dream to me. For a lot of people in America, you could say it's alive and well, but there's a large swath. I mean, a few tens of percentages of all the kids born today who have little chance of achieving that, and then little chance of having a dream that I think is fundamental and has defined this country.
So many years ago, we gave one of our Milken National Education Awards to a principal in the Detroit area. And she had reduced teen pregnancy more than anyone else. And when we went to interview her, and after the surprise and everything at that school, and the news cameras were all over and taking her every word, she said, I found the best contraceptive. That's how we did it. So now as they all roll in, they asked what was it, and she said hope. Hope was the best, that they had a life, they had a career, they could go to school. And Steve, I just can't thank you on behalf of the Milken Institute, but everyone here in the whole country, for the hope you're giving, you and Connie, to those kids. Thank you very much.